Okay.
Good.
Looks like we're getting people coming back.
Great.
Various additional pets. A good number of plants, actually.
Yeah.
Not during the break, but
yeah. Very nice. Sounds like you've had a really good weekend so far.
Yeah, it's been lovely. I've really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
Okay, let's kick off. Okay, so I'm delighted to be able to introduce Subhadramati. Yeah, I think most of our interaction has come from working together on a team for the LBC Winter Retreat.
Yeah.
Yeah, my experience of you on that was just that I've seen you at the London Buddha Centre as well, but you just have this quality of like you really light up a room when you go into it. You're very just like positive and energetic and have a really can-do attitude. And you seem to make very complicated things look very easy. So I don't know how you managed to do that, but feeding 120 people or something like that, and you just did it no problem every day for 10 days. Yes. Yeah, so I'm very, very glad to have you here. Yeah, and I think you have very high standards as well. You really have high expectations of yourself and other people. And I think that's a really, it's just like a really positive quality to have. And I think it draws the best out of people.
Oh, good. Thank you. It's nice to be introduced in such a way.
So, yeah, I've come up with a few questions to ask you. Maybe to start off with, we could just have a bit of an overview of what your practice of or relationship to the Metta Bhavana is, and yeah, like has practicing it changed how you behave over the years, and have you noticed how it might have had an effect on your mind?
Oh yeah, I was a really nice person before I started practicing it, which was a long time ago. So I started, I was trying to think how long I've been meditating. It's about, it must be about 30, I don't know, 38 years, something like that. So it's quite hard to remember much before that. Is that right? 38 years? Am I that old? I must be. Yeah, maybe not quite that. Maybe about 36 years. So it's hard, in a sense, it's most of my adult life. I learned to meditate about 21, 22, probably the age of some of the people here on the retreat. So it's, when you've been practicing that long, it's quite hard to know what's what. I've been meditating, I've been living in Buddhist communities nearly that whole time, just with a few years gap here and there. I've been working in teams with Buddhists. I've been on loads of retreats, loads of solitary retreats, led loads of retreats. So do you see what I mean? It's quite hard to isolate, well, what's the Metta Bhavana and what's all the other stuff. But I'm only kind of half joking when I say I used to be really nice before that, because I think what I do remember is I remember when I first started to meditate, like a sort of explosion and of emotion and feelings and the expression of those. So I remember at the time realizing, maybe quite early on in my meditation life, that up until that point, it's like I'd led quite a sort of blinkered life. Like if you'd asked me before the age of 21, are you happy? I'd have said, yeah. I didn't identify with being unhappy in any way. But looking back, I was just in this narrow band of myself, just kind of going along, not causing trouble, happy enough, And like when I started meditating, it all just exploded. So I felt much, much happier, but also much, much sadder, much more kind of emotional, much more expressive of all the emotions, positive and negative. So I got much more angry, but also much more loving. So everything like just opened up like Pandora's box or something like that. And then you can never put it all back in. So I think that is one thing that I can say was different. And I think, well, it's interesting, isn't it? Any people who meditated even for a short length of time, being on retreat, even if this is your first retreat, it's easy to think, oh yeah, I'll do this and I'll become more calm and I'll become this really Buddhisty calm person, that's really equanimous. But actually, once we go deeper into our minds and our being, it just lets everything sort of loose, which is good. And then we work with that and integrate it. But it's not a sort of it's not the smooth journey we might imagine. I don't know, maybe people can, and the questions can see if they relate to that. So that's quite, where did that start? That started with you asking me the effect of the Metta Bhavana. Yeah, I don't know if I've answered it quite the way that you might have wanted to, but let me think, I've definitely, this isn't exactly your question, I've definitely grown to appreciate and even enjoy that practice more and more and more over the years. So when I first learned to meditate, like many people I encounter when I'm teaching meditation, they don't really like the Metta Bhavana. If they're given a choice, they'll do the mindfulness of breathing. Now, that's not universal. Every now and then you come across people that say, oh, I love the Metta Bhavana, but definitely the majority of people that I teach prefer, out of the two practices, prefer the mindfulness of breathing. And I was definitely one of them. Actually, to tell the truth, I don't really like meditation at all when I first, now when I think back. But actually, when I did meditate, I would gravitate to the mindfulness of breathing. And that's definitely changed over the years. I'm certainly much more appreciative of the practice. I enjoy it. I enjoy the fact it engages the imagination. I think one of the things so I was anticipating this question, so I was thinking, what's changed for me? I think taking up a visualization practice of a Buddha figure when I got ordained. So in our tradition, on ordination, as some people will know, we take on to meditate on a Buddha figure every single day. So I've been ordained for about 25 years. Is that right? Yeah, 1995. So I've been meditating every day upon a Buddha figure, which of course engages the imagination, and so does the Metta Bhavana. So more and more I've seen how the Metta Bhavana and that connection with the Buddha, which has become more and more important to me, really connect with each other. And more I believe, as Bhante Sangharaj, our teacher, has taught us, that metta is a whole path in itself and could lead to enlightenment itself. I feel like I had little glimpses of that in my own experience, but particularly reading Bhante's book, Living with Kindness, which I really recommend, by the way, to everyone on the Metta Bhavana. I'm more and more convinced through studying that over and over again, and the power of the Metta Bhavana. So there you are. Caroline said, before we had a little chat before, and Caroline said, do you tend to be the person that gives short answers or long answers? I said, I think I'm a long answer one. I probably used up about half the interview with that answer.
That's good. You've touched on quite a lot of things I wanted to ask you about, so that's great. Yeah, so you mentioned at the end that through particularly studying Bhante's book, Living with Kindness, that you can kind of see how metta could be a real path to awakening or path to insight. And yeah, I was just wondering if you had kind of personal experiences that you could share around that, or you also talked about opening Pandora's box when you first started to meditate and the kind of explosion of cruder emotions. And, you know, that's like very Vajrayana, to kind of transform and engage all of those emotions. And the reading that we had this morning from Sadanandi was actually from Living with Kindness, and she talked about engaging all of those baser emotions and transforming them. So maybe if you could talk a bit about transforming the more cruder emotions into metta.
Yeah, okay, good. That, as in a way, your question's got two parts, so maybe I'll start with that second part. So for me, like definitely Sangha, spiritual community, has been like the only possible way for me to transform those more crude emotions. In so many ways, let's see, I can almost, my mind's now flooding with all the ways I've been supported by Sangha right at the beginning, but also right up to now. I live in a community with Ariane, who's here, and some other people, and right up till now. So what are the things? So I think the way Sangha supported me in that is one, when you really make friends, and when you surround yourself with people who still love you in spite of everything, I think that really helps, because I know for myself, whenever I had it the other day, I lost my temper a little bit with somebody, or maybe more than a little bit. You then immediately identify with that part of yourself, or I think, oh no, I've gone and lost my temper, and also people have seen that, because people know what I'm really like. Basically, that's the view. Okay, I forget my whole life and everything else I've done. It hones in on that one moment when I've done something that I think is disgraceful in some way. No, that's what I'm really like, and now everyone knows it, and that's just like the end, So then I was actually talking to Ariane and telling her at our kitchen table, saying, "Oh, Ariane, I've messed up," and just realizing that Ariane could see more of me than that one moment. You see, it's not that you just met. Of course, it's not very good to lose your temper. Of course, it's not. I feel a bit embarrassed saying this in front of everyone. But the fact that Ariane, I could just, even in the way she was looking at me, the way she was responding to me, she was showing me, look, Subhadramati, yeah, okay, you messed up a bit, but I see there's more of you than that, and I can reflect that back. So I think that's a very important way where friendships over time can help. I think another way they can help is, let's see, when one's not aware of one's cruder emotions. I mean, that was a very, I was definitely aware that I had done that. But other times, especially again, living in community, like I think I'm fine. I don't know if you hit this, Caroline, but I think I'm fine. I'm kind of going around thinking I'm fine. And someday, there's other people that say, like, are you okay? And then you can start to realize, oh, maybe there's more going on than you yourself realize. So you can't, I suppose in a positive sense, you can't hide the more you're involved in spiritual community, whether that's a residential one. Obviously, everybody hasn't got the chance to do it, but just having friends, you can't hide, which is terribly squirmily embarrassing sometimes. You don't want to be seen, but actually in a deeper way, you do want to be, and that can help you reveal yourself to yourself. I feel like I've been revealed to myself by the connection with other people. I hope I've managed to explain that properly, because it's really important. I'm sure there was another thing I thought. Oh yeah, so how you transform the crude. Yes, another really important way, which connects with Sangha in a slightly different way. For me, that's been kind of my path. Now, this might not be for everyone, although probably for most people, is taking responsibility in relation to other people. So, I mean, by this time, I've been in the order quite a long time, so I take responsibility in quite big ways, especially the responsibility to conduct ordinations. Now, that's a massive thing to do. And as soon as you're involved in something like that, you think, well, golly, like I'm going to have to transform this stuff, because it's not just, I'm not just affecting myself. Of course, you never are just affecting yourself, but frees you from the illusion that you're only just affecting yourself. The more responsibility. Now, for me, I've taken more and more over the years, but, it starts so small. I remember the first time at a class, in the days when we had physical classes where we could come to the centre, the very first time somebody asked me to help with tidying up the cushions. And I felt great, actually, that I'd been allowed to be involved in that way. But I think even that carries a responsibility. As soon as you're on a team, your actions aren't your own in a way. They never are your own. You're always affecting everyone, but you see that more. And that's challenging as well, but it's growthful. It definitely makes me like pull my socks up, as it were, realizing, oh, yeah, as I say, this doesn't just affect me. Like when we cooked together on that winter retreat team, actually, we had great fun in the kitchen. But if we hadn't, that would really have affected the whole retreat. If the cooks had all been like squabbling and quarreling and so on, it wouldn't have just made our lives horrible. It wouldn't have been a very attractive sort of thing to show a whole retreat. It wouldn't, it's funny, isn't it? Because you can't be too self-conscious about it. You can't pretend either. You've got to, but again, I hope that's making sense, that I think it draws out of you, it draws out of me more of a wish to become more integrated the more I take responsibility, spiritual responsibility in relation to other people. Can't take responsibility for other people, take responsibility in relation to them. So, okay, so that was the first. But how would you go about transforming these more cruder things? The first step, of course, is to get in touch with them. Because, as I say, before I ever meditated in the first place, I thought I was like, just a nice girl, really. I didn't realize I even had all these crude emotions. It's a classic thing, isn't it? When you teach the Metta Bhavana, usually there's one or two, a handful of people. And I was one of these myself. I thought, I can't think of anyone for the enemy stage, the difficult person stage. And then I know when I'm teaching now, I think, just wait and see, if you carry on meditating, you will realize that we have more ill will and even hatred than at first we gave credit for, we can feel a bit embarrassed or ashamed about that, but it's nothing to be ashamed of, because everybody has this side of enlightenment, and it's only once you know it, then you can transform it. And of course, what's also revealed is positive emotion. You've also have more positive emotion than you realize you have as well. So that was one bit of the question. Have we got time? I have no idea what time it is, because there was another bit about if I had any glimpses of Bhante's kind of assertion. And I think my strongest glimpse of that, which I've tried to reflect on ever since, was about, I think it was about 5 years ago. I did a very long retreat. It was 5 months altogether. It was 2 retreats back to back. It was 3 months, a retreat with other people. It was the ordination retreat at Akashavana, a retreat center in Spain, where women get ordained. So I've been, I think, cooking or something on that retreat for 3 whole months. So completely, when you're on that retreat, although there's other people, as a group, you're completely isolated. You don't listen to any news or have any news of the outside world, and you don't even see anyone. You don't see anyone outside the retreat. It's so isolated the whole time. So, and then I went straight from there onto solitary retreat without sort of virtually unbroken, and did another 2 months on my own. So the conditions were very good for meditation. And I was particularly focusing on the Metta Bhavana. And it was always hard to put these experiences into words. It was in the 5th stage of the Metta Bhavana. I've come to realize, that's the first thing I came to realize, that 5th stage is very, very important. And it was just a sense of quite a tangible sense of that. I was going to say everybody wants to grow, but it's deeper than that. It's like life itself wants to grow. What the experience was like, it was like, okay, I was doing that 5th stage, and there I was, like sitting there, you know, radiating metta. Okay, metta to the friend, metta to the enemy, metta to the neutral person, metta to more and more people. So that felt very positive. But then I asked myself, what would happen if I, as it were, just stepped out of the middle? That was the image, that I was in the middle, sort of trying to radiate this metta out to everyone, and also trying to radiate it out, even just in general. Bhante talks about this, just like this, the way the sun just shines, whether or not there's anything to shine on. But then the even deeper thing was, what would happen if I just stepped out of the middle of this? And somehow I imagined myself stepping out of the middle, and instead of nothing, it was like there was this golden fountain just shot up. And the fountain was like life trying to grow. And with it was a realization that all life wants to be fulfilled. That's what life is, in a way. It's energy trying to be fulfilled, and all I've got to do is align myself with that. And it felt so simple, you know, all I've got to do is align myself with that. In a sense, I don't need to generate anything or do anything. The only action is to align myself with this golden fountain. And that felt like something like the closest glimpse of something. I don't even want to say what. But I've, of course, it's not so strong now because it's years later and I'm not on retreat, but I do try and connect with that image in the Metta Bhavana as much as I can, and especially on retreats. And it feels like maybe a glimpse of a glimpse of a glimpse of something like what awakening would be. Maybe it's awakening to that's in a sense all we have to do is to like cooperate with something that's much, 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 you know, greater and goldener. And yeah, that's actually, I haven't tried to quite articulate it, so that's good to be asked the question. Yeah, or I've tried to articulate it, but I think I've articulated it a bit better now. Yeah.
Wow, thank you. I think probably we've got time for, well, we'll see, maybe one, maybe two more. Guys, very moving actually, just listening to you describe that. Yeah, it feels I feel kind of more porous, like my heart is kind of open to that description that you've given. So that's really lovely. Thank you for sharing it. Yeah, so I think sometimes there can be an idea that metta is a bit kind of pallid or weak. And you talked about niceness and then discovering that actually, you know, there's just much more to you. And that includes the kind of more difficult stuff. And I wonder if you could say something about the kind of radicalness or passionate or uncompromisingness of metta.
Okay, let's think. Yes, so let me just think. I want to sort of say two things at once in response to that. I want to, yes, it is uncompromising and even passionate. I mean, I'll come on to that, but I also want to refer back to what Shantikara was saying in the meditation he led us in and talked before that we might not always feel metta as some big, huge rush of passion or something. Like Shantikara was really saying, it's a wish, it's a volition. And I think that's important because maybe strength doesn't always mean what we think it does. Maybe strength could be, let's say in a friendship, some friendships are very passionate. but there could be a quiet friendship, you know, where you just showed up for each other every week, but maybe over years, through thick and thin, nothing dramatic ever happened, you know, but you just sort of didn't let each other down for years and years. And then maybe when you were old, you'd look back and think, oh gosh, yeah, I'm a really good friend to that person. Maybe I'd even die for them or something. I don't know, but nothing dramatic ever happened, or I trust that person with my life. Maybe that'd be more like it. Even saying I'd die for you sounds a bit melodramatic. But, oh God, I really trust that person, you know. But do you see what I mean? So that's strong, but it's not strong in a melodramatic, oh yes, I'll burn at the stake for you or something like that, or I'll, you know. So actually, maybe the two bits of what I was trying to say do join in, that strong could mean that, you know. It could be, or strong could mean like not turning your back on somebody when they're in like a right state or something like that. You're still there with them. Again, it might not be dramatic, but you know, that could be strong as well. I think it helps me when I'm, rather than thinking of metta in an abstract way, just think, oh, well, how would I relate to a friend? You know, if a friend came to me upset, or a friend came to me with good news, or, you know, metta is that response that would be able to meet however that friend was, you know, if they were in a bad mood, if they were in a joyful mood, if they were sick or something. So in that way, I don't think it is pallid, but neither is it necessarily melodramatic. Maybe that's the point I want to draw out. And it can be uncompromising, just as in friendship, sometimes, you know, it's good to challenge our friends, you know. Of course, one has to be sure that you're doing that with a skillful motive. That's good as well, you know. That's an aspect of metta. So metta isn't just saying, oh, don't worry, you're fine, you know. Just as in a friendship, that's not the best way to always be a friend. Sometimes it is, but sometimes you might need to say, oh, come on, you know, you can do better than that. Or I know that, you know, I know you're capable of more than that. So it's active. Maybe that's what we're coming down to. It's active. And again, this is what Shantakar was saying, not to identify it with a feeling. It might be accompanied by a feeling, but it's active. I really like something Subhuti wrote when he was actually talking about faith, Shraddha, but I think it applies to all positive emotion. He talked about head, heart, and legs. So sometimes what we tend to do is we over-identify with heart. You know, we think unless I'm feeling something, then there's no metta there. Unless I'm feeling something, there's no shraddha or faith there. But actually, we might not be feeling much, but we might be just showing up for someone. So that's the legs, you know. Or we might just have, you know, the head is more like, we might just deeply understand, oh yeah, this is right, you know. This, you know, that maybe a bit more like that experience I had on the mountain. Metta is reality. Reality is metta. It wasn't intellectual as in a brain thing, but it was definitely a reflection, you know. Yeah.
Thank you. Reminds me of this poem called Maintenance, where it talks about love as being doing the tax return and loading the dishwasher.
Okay, yeah, I don't know the poem, but that sounds right. Yeah. Sometimes melodramatic gestures, yeah, because some people say that, oh yes, I'll die for you. You feel like saying, like, how about just doing the hoovering or something?
Yeah. Let's do one more.
Okay.
How do you remain consistently engaged with meditation, like through thick and thin?
Ah, that's a good question. How do I, or how does one?
Either, maybe both.
Well, for me, maybe I'll say, how do I? Well, for me, it's been, as I mentioned, I've nearly always lived in residential communities, and I do now. And that's been like a massive, massive support to me. Yeah, that's just to have other people to meditate with. Just really helps, I find, you know. And again, I feel very lucky and fortunate that I have got that in my life, and I've had it most of my life. So that's really, really helped me. Then it's interesting, I think now it's not a question anymore for me about whether I'll meditate. Of course, you know, it's probably what is a question is how deep I'm going, which sometimes is a bit questionable. But I just know what happens if I don't, you know, I just get really ragged, you know. So emotionally ragged, immediately relationships start to break down, you know. It's essential for me to meditate. What over the last couple of years, what's become more and more important to me is like surrounding my meditation with sort of more meditative like activities. It's become more and more important to me to have time before meditation, and what I usually do is read poetry and drink tea before meditation. And what I usually do after meditation is have some quiet time in some way. It's become more and more important to me to not rush out of meditation, if at all possible, to not have, okay, it's 8 o'clock and now I've got my next meeting or something. I find that actually more and more I find that sort of damages my meditation. I'm not really answering your question in a way, but maybe that's the bit I'm now taking more seriously. So I think because of all the support I've had from community, I mean, you can never say for sure, but I feel like daily meditation has got a momentum now that I feel fairly sure of. But what I'm working at is more making sure that I don't neglect to have time before and afterwards. And it's very, very tempting, you know, because there's always stuff to do. I mean, I work full time at the London Buddhist Centre. You know, one might imagine working at a Buddhist centre is all kind of spacious, and people might think that of you, Caroline, at Adhisthana, but there's loads to do. There's about 1 million unanswered emails. So it's so tempting to think, okay, meditation done, right, let's get on it. But more and more I'm realizing, yeah, that's damaging to the meditation itself. So I try and think of my morning little routine as having a little mini solitary retreat every morning, which Bantu said, which is good because, of course, you know, especially with this situation, it's like really hard to go on retreat. So I try and make that my little daily retreat. Quite good to say that out loud because I can hold myself to it more, and Ariane, who I live with, can hold me to it. Yeah.
Great, thank you very, very much. That was wonderful. Let's take a 5-minute break. So come back at 11:55 and just, you know, think up some good questions for Subhadramati in the meantime.
Yeah, you can ask me anything. I don't mind.
Great. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you, Caroline. Really very, very nice to talk to you. Really.
Yeah.
Good. Right, shall we have a little break? Let me put back on gallery view. Are you still there? There's Megan. Are we still live?
Yeah. Yeah, you're still.
Okay, you're back on.
Okay. Welcome back. Few people still away. Okay, so we've got quite a nice chunk of time now for questions, about half an hour. And if people want to ask a question, because I can't see you all at the moment, if you could just type in the chat, like raise hand or I have a question or something like that, just let me know on the chat that you have a question and then I can go through you all in order. But I think Esme is going to kick us off with a question about her meditation. So over to you, Esme.
I can remember what I emailed you now. Yeah, I just had a question around the Metta Bhavana, and I can find it can be really opening, and I can connect with people in all of the stages. Yeah, not every time, but then that can leave me quite like open and vulnerable, but in a way that then next time something difficult happens, I kind of can't hold it, or it's extra painful, and then I kind of feel this need to like retreat quite far back and being like less trusting of people, and I kind of feel like I'm sort of ping-ponging between I'm trying to open up, but then it's too painful and I have to like shrink again, and I feel like there must be something to do around this.
Really, really good question, Esme. And I'm wondering if it ties in with, do you remember I was saying about this, the range of one's emotional experience sort of gets bigger. That you'll feel more connected. So joy will feel more joyful, but sorrow feels more sorrowful. So it sounds like something like that's happening. You're feeling more connected and more love, but that also means you feel any pain or sorrow you feel more intensely. Is that right? Is it something like that?
Yeah, I think so. I think I was thinking of it as kind of being more open to that person in lots of ways, say like feeling a positive emotional connection or something, but then I'll kind of maybe like let my guard down, even though I know that this person does something I find difficult. I'll be like, oh, that's because they've got their issues around this thing or whatever. But then when I next come to them and that happens, like it's almost like I've like forgotten it, or I'm trusting they won't do it again or something.
Okay, that's good to expand on that. So that is good. So I think it's good to bring up. So metta doesn't mean that we're, I don't know, a sort of doormat for people to sort of step upon. It's not that we have to become naive about people. People really do unskillful things, and metta isn't pretending to ourselves that they don't. So if someone, I don't know, isn't very good at keeping their promise or something, metta doesn't mean always giving, just ignoring that. And metta would include taking that fact about them in. But do you see what I mean? It doesn't mean that thinking everybody is just going to be really nice all the time. It has to include, well, people have got faults and failings. So it doesn't mean pretending they don't, but it means not having ill will towards them for that fact. But it still might be a fact that we have to take into account. Does that make sense to you and maybe other people? So it's not that we're trying to pretend unskillfulness and harshness doesn't exist.
Yeah, I think I don't know if it's like slightly more nuanced or something, and I can't explain it, but I think it's that kind of, it just, maybe there's something in me that when I then feel warm towards someone, just like my defenses like go down, or even when I'm like, I knew they were going to do this, but yeah, it's like, maybe that ties into what you said before about it, then it's even more painful or something. Yeah.
And if that's true, and maybe this is for everyone, because I think it's quite important that our habit, of course, the intuitive thing when something's painful is to close off from it. But what we can more and more learn is to sort of include painful feelings in our experience. And sort of, it's like we're trying to get bigger. That's an image that I find very helpful. It's that we're trying to become a bigger person so that we can sort of contain more of those nuances and ups and downs and pleasure and pain without feeling we have to shrink. It's that, which is very, very counterintuitive. It's intuitive to sort of shrink away from painful feelings, whether they're in ourselves or brought about by contact with other people. The counterintuitive thing is to grow bigger, but actually it's the counterintuitive thing that we're trying to do. So every time we notice ourselves feeling that instinct to shrink, then we can think, oh, how could I grow bigger so that I'm not so sort of blown about by the worldly winds of other people? So that's true. And the other thing I said is true. It's not about letting people hurt you and stuff like that either. We've still got to have our intelligence about us. Yeah, so we've still got to keep our, metta doesn't mean reneging on our intelligence about people. And I don't think Esme meant that. But we will find ourselves more sensitive. We'll feel like shrinking, but actually what really counterintuitively, it's about becoming bigger and in a funny way, even more open, not less open. But that's not intuitive. So that takes a bit of work and practice. So I hope that's helpful.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Ben, next.
Thanks.
Hi,
Hi,
Ben.
Subhadramati. Hi. You've touched on it already a bit with Caroline, I think, but I wonder if you'd mind saying a bit more about living in spiritual community as a practice.
Oh yeah, I can. There's lots I could say, so I might need you to guide me a little bit about what you're interested in particular.
Okay. I guess I'm becoming more interested in it as I'm practicing more. So knowing that I'm thinking about living in a spiritual community or looking for a spiritual community to live in, what might you say to me about it?
Okay, so what I'd say is that sounds great. And also what I'd say is, let me see, I'm just trying to think of put this the right way. It's probably not going to be what you think it is when you get there. A bit like, you've been on retreat before, have you been? I can't remember. Yeah, a bit like, it's analogous to before you go on retreat, or the way people might think of retreats is, oh, it's going to be all lovely. I'm going to be totally positive the whole time and everything. It's a bit like that. You will be, if you live with other people who practice the Dharma, that's definitely true. You will be living with other people who practice the Dharma. That doesn't mean that they're always going to be in a good mood. That doesn't mean they're always going to be radiating metta constantly from 6 a.m. till like midnight. That doesn't mean they're going to always be mindful all the time. So in other words, you'll be living with real people and you're a real person. So they'll see you and all your ups and downs, and you'll see them. So I guess I'm just saying, don't be kind of naive in the wrong sort of way. Be idealistic. That's really important. and keep trying to, what we've got to do is we've got to keep trying to live up to our ideals while constantly forgiving ourselves and each other for not living up to our ideals. And I think that's particularly important actually in the spiritual life. I've been thinking about this a lot in residential communities, but also in the general Sangha. You've got to be careful that you don't turn the Dharma into almost a sort of weapon against each other, you know. I've seen that happen because now we've got another thing we can berate ourselves and other people for not doing. Like, you were mindful, you were merciful, you know, you didn't, you know. So I think that's what I mean by not letting the very thing that we want to create become the thing that something that we turn against ourselves and other people. It's easily done. I've seen it done. I've done it myself. We've got, putting it in simpler language, we've probably got higher expectations of the Sangha and spiritual community than other people. And in a way it's good, we should have, but in another way, we can get terribly disappointed, you know, if someone in the Sangha or in our community behaves unskillfully. We can get terribly disappointed and even disillusioned. So I'd say, that's why I'm saying, just remember, you'll be with real people and they'll kind of mess up and you'll mess up, and we'll all be doing that all the time. And but worse than that, you'll see each other doing it because you know, if you're just meeting someone for a coffee, you don't see all the mess ups, you know. If you're living with them, they do. So I think that phrase, which is actually not my own, it's from another teacher, Ratnagosha, of, you know, we've got to keep forgiving ourselves and others for not living up to our ideals while keep trying to live up to our ideals. That's my advice. I hope that helps. And I hope
great. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you. Oscar.
Hey, Subhadramati. Thank you for your talk.
Yeah, I'm just trying to find you. Oh yeah, I found you. Yeah.
Hey. Yeah, I was just curious about what you mentioned about metta, or maybe metta not purely being a feeling, that it's like an intention. And I suppose I just find it, I often check in with my body to kind of gauge, to have a more honest look of what is going on, I suppose. Like, I kind of check in and see, all right, what is actually happening here? And I suppose I struggle with knowing, I guess, how do I know if something is sincere? If my body, say for example, I'm doing an action that I feel is generous, but I feel very contracted, or like unsure, like in my body feels quite tense or something like that, even though I am doing something that is generous, say, the feeling might not be there, but the action is there. But I struggle to know what my intention actually is at that point. It might be quite confused because my body is saying one thing, my action is saying one thing, and then my mind might be saying another thing. And I'm kind of, I suppose, without having the feeling as the basis of if I know something is sincere or metaphor, I'm just kind of wondering where to check in on, I guess. How do I know, I suppose?
Okay, that's a very good question, and I'm sure, again, it's a common experience for all of us that all those bits of us are saying slightly different things to us, and it's quite confusing. I mean, probably this side of enlightenment, we are all quite confused, you know, because we're not integrated, you know. So maybe just to say, that's the first thing to say, that they will never be doing anything purely unless we were enlightened. The only time we would do a generous act with there not being any confliction around that completely would be when we were enlightened. At the same time, sometimes it feels less conflicted than others. So let's think. So what I would say off the top of my head, Oscar, is maybe with your example, you're doing a generous thing, your action is generous, but you're feeling a bit tense. Maybe just ask yourself, well, what's that tension pointing to? Where's the conflict here? You could just even ask yourself that question, but I would also say, don't let that stop you doing the thing, because doing the thing also will change how we feel, you know, especially actually a generous act, because there's another person involved. So, you know, say you give the person the gift or whatever it is you're giving them, or maybe it's you, I don't know, you're giving some money to somebody on the street or something. You're maybe you're thinking, oh, I'm not quite sure I'm sort of completely unconflicted about this, and I can feel that. Also allow yourself to be affected by the response, you know. If they suddenly smile at you and you realize you've totally made their day, that also becomes then a factor. You know, you might find then that changes how you feel in your body. Actually think, oh, actually, that was a great thing to do after all. So take that into, what I'm trying to say is take in the fact that doing the action will also have an effect, and you can check in with that. So I'm probably trying to say too many things at once, as I often am. So I'll just go back over what I'm trying to say. So what I'm trying to say is there'll probably always be conflict this side of enlightenment. There must be, because probably enlightenment by definition is the state of just like free flowing compassion, with kind of nobody being compassionate. All that is, you know, is compassion. So up until that, there'll always be conflict. Then the next thing I'm saying is don't worry about that too much, because otherwise we'd just be paralyzed. We'd never actually do anything. We'd never give anybody anything or try and be generous or anything. But then it can be interesting to check in with oneself. Oh, what's the conflict? You know, check in, but not. It's like not take it too seriously, but not take it too unseriously, you know, just kind of just check in with it lightly. But also then you'll get new information with every time you act, something will happen in relation to yourself and in relation to someone else. So then that's a new thing to take into account. Always feeling a bit conflicted, but you know, when the guy on the street just suddenly looked and you know, looked so happy in his eyes. Oh, crikey, then all that tension melted away, you know. So, yeah, I hope that's given you some things to think about. It's not exactly an answer, but some more things to think about. Good, very good question, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's good.
Thank you. You just reminded me of my precept to unload the washing up rack more frequently, even when I really don't want to. So now I've realized that, you can all ask me about it next time you see me. Next up, we've got Ruby.
Hi, Ruby. We're together, so that's very nice. Hello.
It's nice to see you. You're looking very radiant today. Yeah, so you kind of spoke about well, the question that I have in mind. You kind of spoke about it with Oscar. It's kind of to do with I guess I just, you know, I'm meditating and I'm practicing metta and practicing being generous. But sometimes, like when I go for walks and I walk past people who are homeless, I almost feel intimidated by them sometimes as well. And it's just kind of like, oh, I want to be generous, and even smiling, you know, oh, I want to smile at you. But then I fear that if I smile, then they'll expect more, then they'll want me to give them money, and there's also a lot of this, there's so much resistance there. I had a woman come up to me the other day, and it came when I least expected it. And she asked me for money, and she asked me for food. Sometimes I even lie and I say I don't have any money, and that's not true. But I guess sometimes it's the impact and the shock of it. It kind of feels like it comes out of nowhere. And then later I'll reflect back on it and think, I could have bought her some food. I could have done that. I could have taken that moment to be more generous, but I didn't. And so I don't know what's been your experience on this. And
I think it does follow on from Oscar, but I think it's brought in some new things. I mean, these are the kind of ethical dilemmas we all come up with all the time, just to say, isn't it? There's always going to be this, you know, and that's a classic one. I think it sounds like I also factor in there as being taken by surprise. So it's interesting that you reflected later, especially, so we'll take the exact thing of, so maybe you've been caught by surprise and you've actually told a lie, which I know would go against, knowing you, Ruby, I know that would go against your ethic. But I wonder if, in that example, I'm quite interested that you might find a middle way, because okay, you didn't want to tell the lie, and then when you reflected on it, you thought, well, I could have given some food, both of, and that's true, you could have. I wonder what it would be like for you, and this is because I know you a little bit more. You can still say something quite firm that's not a lie, like, not today, sorry. You know, and when I've tried that, just the very fact that I've responded has had a very, very positive response, because what I've heard people say again and again, who are living on the streets and begging on the streets, the worst thing is that everybody's walking past with their eyes down. So that's been my experience of being even saying, not today, sorry, you know, something that's truthful, you know, but also, you know, it actually has got a positive effect. You know, it doesn't lead to a demand. In my experience, I mean, I can't say what, you know, I can only say my own experience. It hasn't led to an expectation or a demand for more. It's actually led to gratitude. You know, usually then the person says, oh, God bless, or something. You know, there's something that they seem pleased that they've been acknowledged in some way, you know. So on the whole, you know, so of course people are just people, whether, you know, you can never predict what people are going to do. But I think maybe it's giving ourselves more options. We think, oh, unless I go and like buy them a meal, I've got to tell a lie, you know. But we've got to sort of see, well, there could be another thing. And sometimes we'll only know that in retrospect. Sometimes I think it's like the mindfulness of breathing, you know, sometimes, you know, in the first stage you notice after the breath, and then you're trying to get to your notice before. So often we notice after, oh God, I didn't handle that very well. What could I do different? I think that's fine to have that reflection afterwards, but then you're trying to move, okay, next time in the actual real life situation, I'll try something a bit different. It might not work. Then you've got to say, oh God, did that work? Oh, actually, then I went too far the other way, you know. And, you know, but I think reflecting on your actions, that's the thing that I want to draw out from what you've said. You reflected and you realized, no, I wasn't really happy with telling that lie. What could I have done differently? You know, and again, that's where our Sangha friends can come in. We can just try and check things out and think, oh, what could I have done a bit differently? Yeah. So you can let me know how that goes, Ruby. Yeah.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. Yeah, very good question. Okay, final question. Juliet?
Hiya. Thank you for what you've been saying so far. It's been really helpful. The question that came to mind for me was about the fourth stage of the Metta Bhavana that I always struggle with, because for me there's only really one person that comes to mind that's worth trying to, like, I don't really have that many enemies, you know what I mean, that come to mind anyway. But like when they lead a meditation, like the usual examples for an enemy would be like someone you don't get along with at work or something. But what would your advice be for, like, if the person that comes to mind like did something inexcusable, like, and you really can't see any good in them, and it's like a bit more than just a co-worker that you don't like, do you know what I mean? Because I don't really have like anyone like that. Yeah. But like, I don't want to say I think they're like pure evil, because that's not really, I don't think anyone is, but I definitely struggle with cultivating any kind of love, because I genuinely don't think they deserve it, and I can't. Okay. So what would your advice be on that?
That's a really, really brilliant question, Juliet. And I think it's really good to sort of, well, what am I trying to say? I think sometimes people should teach in the Metta Bhavana maybe need to include the fact that sometimes in our lives we have got someone that's really, really hurt us, or really, really hurt someone we love. And that's why I tend to say the enemy stage, to include that, yes, there can be people that really, really hurt us, and we think, I can't, you know, they've done something that's hurt us or hurt somebody we love so badly that it's a real struggle to think, how could we ever feel metta for them? So what I would say, if we have such a person in our lives, is sometimes we might need to wait until we're in the right circumstance to creatively work with them. If we're just in our ordinary lives, just doing our daily Metta Bhavana, and then that person looms into it, it just might be too much, you know. So it might be, I can't say this, I don't want to make a rule, I can just make a general suggestion. It might be better to wait until maybe we're on retreat, or when we feel like, and we feel that we've got a good reservoir of positivity to even bring that person to mind. Otherwise, we'll bring them to mind, and it would just, that'll end up overwhelming the practice. We'll think, oh, I can't, you know, all the things they've done and everything will come to our mind and it'll overwhelm it. So that's why I think that sometimes it's better to practice a bit with people who are not such big enemies. At the same time, it is possible to find a creative way of working in our minds with such a person, and it's important because it's affecting us. If we've got someone in our lives that we just has done something that we feel is unforgivable, we're placing a limit on ourselves. So that's why it's important in terms of our own growth. But that's not, you can't just do that. It's not easy, and it's not a matter of forgetting what they did. It's not a matter of agreeing with what they did. It's not a matter of condoning what they did. It's a matter of realizing that in the end, metta is something bigger than all that. So sometimes with someone that I feel has done a great deal of harm, the first step might be to just not wish them harm, because we want to retaliate. But actually, non-harm, the Buddhist word is ahimsa, is a positive state in its own right in Buddhism. So sometimes I might just ask myself, well, I might be thinking, I just don't want this person in my life. I can't countenance them. I might ask myself, well, do I wish them harm? And then it was, oh, actually, I don't wish them harm. And just, that's a start. So I think, but again, I would wait until I would wait till I was in the right mode to do that. But the important thing is to realize, in a sense, you're not doing it for them. I mean, whatever they've done, you know. You're doing it to have a positivity within oneself that is so strong that it can't be overturned, no matter how badly one is treated. So that's why metta is a strengthening. We're strengthening positivity within ourselves, and you know, so that's why we're doing it. So I think it's important to even realize that it doesn't mean. I think we fear that means, or that means what they've been. It's like saying, oh, they're let off the hook and what they did wasn't that bad or something. But it's not. It's not that. It's like we're trying to strengthen something in ourselves. So my strongest example, this isn't personal, but it's a friend of mine. Somebody murdered someone she was close to. And that was her fourth stage person, as you can imagine. And she said, finally on retreat, she said she had this experience that it wasn't like, all she could describe it as like the metta surrounded the experience of what she was feeling. It wasn't like she forgot that had happened. It wasn't that what had happened wasn't a dreadful thing that has affected her whole life, like very, very strongly. But somehow she had an experience of metta being even bigger than what had happened. And that was the breakthrough for her. Very hard to talk about such a big subject in such a short time, but I hope at least some of what I've said is helpful in some way, Juliet.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you.
Good. And thanks very much for bringing it up. It's very, very important. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you very, very much, Subhadramati. Just wonderful to have such kind of thoughtful responses to those questions, and just the whole time that you've been here bringing such a breadth of knowledge and experience and wisdom to it all. I think what really stands out for me is how much faith and confidence you have in the practices and in the Sangha. And I know that's, you know, based on your experience of being transformed from those contexts and from those practices. So that's, that's just really, really wonderful. Thank you.
Good, thank you. And thank you for inviting me. I hope I can come again.
Okay. I think we're now going to have a little break, but let me just check with Shantikara how long he wants that to be.
Let's have a 5-minute break.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Subhadramati.